Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. I am glad to be here and grateful for this last week. The week culminated on Saturday with my birthday, and again, I like the saying, I feel more like I do now than I ever have, and that's true. And I also like the saying that if I didn't know how old how old would I be if I didn't know how old I was? And so I'm going to subscribe to that. But somebody else also said that the key to longevity is to keep having birthdays. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm just going to keep right on having them. There's a formula that says E does not equal O. E plus R equals O. And so if E is the event, what the formula says, the event does not determine the outcome. What determines the outcome is our response to the event. And there's been a number of different books that have been written about this, not the least of which is Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. And, in that he talks about how, as he went into the German prisoner of war camps, the Jewish camps there, and he watched many of his friends pass away and die, and they stripped him of all of his possessions, his clothing, everything, and just fed him little bits of food. But he said, the one thing that nobody can take from me is what I have right here. And it's my ability to react and respond in my thoughts to things that happen. And that's so true. And I'd like to share a story with you that just happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks and kind of came to light just this last couple of days as I was coaching in Chicago. But I coach a wonderful man, a very successful businessman from the East Coast. I'll call him Mark. And about 3 weeks ago, I was driving along. Lori was in the car with me. I get a phone call, and it shows up as Mark. And I said, well, he rarely calls me. Let's see what he wants. So I said, hello, Mark. And he said, Lee, do you mind if I put you on speakerphone? He was in his car. I said, no, not at all. He says, I'm sitting here with my son, and we're discussing something, and we'd like your opinion on it. He said, if you were in line at Starbucks, going through to buy something at Starbucks, and you inadvertently were busy checking messages or something, and there was a gap between you and the car in front of you, and the car behind you started honking their horn and getting out, upset and almost stepping out of the car and getting mad, how would you react to that? Well, it just so happens that I wrote about something like that in my book, an experience that I had, so I was mentally prepared, and I'm sure he probably knew that. But I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what I would do? I'd probably, when I got up to the window, pay for his purchase. Whatever he was buying, I would pay for it, and then just anonymously leave. And he said, thank you very much, Lee. That's all I need to know, and he hung up. Now, I had no clue for the last 3 or 4 weeks exactly what had happened. But apparently with his son, who had been having some, typical issues that teenagers have in school. He was 14 years old, I believe, and with the challenges that go on there. And his dad was talking to him about gratitude and shared this experience that he had with him. And it was an actual experience that Mark had where he did just that. In spite of the outrage of the person behind him, the impatience, instead of that, he did buy his entire meal. He bought more than just coffee, but he bought the whole thing, and he left. And he told his son about this, and his son said, Dad, nobody else on earth would ever do that. You're the only one that does stuff like that. And the typical teenager reaction when you're, I'm right, you're wrong kind of a thing. And so he said, well, let's just call somebody. And he dialed up the phone, and he called me. And he was so appreciative when I got to meet with him. He said, you can't believe what that did for my son. And in fact, he showed me a letter that his son had written to him. Now, this wasn't just a typed email. This wasn't a text message. This was actually a handwritten letter that was sealed and that he opened it up. And this undoubtedly is going to be one of Mark's greatest treasures. One of the things that he values more than anything else, more than money could buy. But inside of that, on 2 sides of the paper, this young man said, I'm not perfect, Dad, but you know what? I have the perfect dad, and I love you. And he talked about the characteristics of his father, and he was able to see things with a different set of eyes. And it brought tears to my eyes as I read that, and just such a powerful thing, And here's a father taking the time to teach his son a lesson, and I commend him for that. But it's also a father teaching himself a lesson, because as he went through that experience himself, he grew from it as he witnessed to me and shared with me that same experience. So really, it wasn't the event. The event could have determined the outcome. Mark could have got upset, could have got outraged, jumped out of his car, called him an idiot, whatever you might do. But instead he chose to handle it a completely different way. And look at the difference it's made in his life and in his son's life already. And he's already impacted me, and look at me, I'm telling you the story now. And I wonder, we'll never know what happened to the man behind as he went up there to get his lunch. Maybe that affected him. Maybe he didn't go home and kick the dog that night. Maybe the dog's going to survive. You know, like somebody with a temper like that, you just don't know. But I'm sure that some processional, some outcome from that is something that will make a difference that Mark probably will never see. So my challenge for you this week, in terms of making this year one of the most meaningful years ever, is to look for those small ways. Think about the things that are happening to you and say to yourself, E does not equal O. How I respond determines the outcome. And if you respond in gratitude, not just necessarily with gratitude, but in gratitude. It could be a bad event, it could be something that's really terrible that you're not grateful for, but you always have the choice to be in gratitude. And so if you respond in gratitude, the ripples of that, you may never always see them, but I guarantee you that as a leader, and you don't need a title to be a leader, this is for everybody, if you will start doing that. Let's challenge ourselves, shall we, this week, to find a way that we might do something exceptional, that we might be able to be the ones that are in charge of our own destiny, create our own outcomes by how we respond to them. Thank you for being with me this Monday. I look forward to talking to you next Monday, and have a meaningful week. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.